Actually JFDM. So it's New Year's Day 2025. My wife and son and I went to a family friend's house, like we usually do, to have lentils and grapes, or whatever it is they eat. I mean, I'm picky, so I prefer my grapes kind of crushed and fermented, if you know what I mean. And wittingly wore a new pair of socks that my wife had gotten me for Christmas. They have D20s on them, and they say, you can certainly try, on like the foot pad. And I'm sitting on the couch, and my mom's friend sees my socks and asks me what's on them. So I explained that it's a 20-sided die, and it's typically used for tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. She immediately is like, I want to try that. Okay. So, for context, I don't know the exact age of this woman, but she's, I believe, roughly my mom's age. My mom was born in 1957. 2025 minus 1957 is math. Speaking of my mother, her friend now goes, Betsy, we're gonna try Dungeons and Dragons. So now here I am explaining how Dungeons and Dragons works to a pair of 60-plus-year-old women who are saying quite genuinely that they want to try it and think it sounds like fun and something they would enjoy. I mean, they rope my mother's significant other Mark into it now, too, so now I'm going to run a one-shot for 3 boomers. And my not a tabletop nerd wife. She plays in one other in-person game I run for coworkers, but that's about it. So now, be me, a DM trying to run the perfect game for an audience that, in my closed, unenlightened mind, shouldn't even be interested in one. I mean, they don't know any of the tropes. They have no real expectations. They don't know the rules. Then it dawned on me. They don't know any of the tropes. They have no real expectations. They don't know the rules. Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
What are some tips to make sure you are giving a new player every opportunity to have a great time when they sit down at your table for maybe their first role-playing game experience? Well, let me give you a few of the ones that I use and what I'm going to be employing when it comes to this game. So, tip number 1 is to know your audience. In this case, I'm taking that as theme the adventure around something I know they like. And so I'm going to be writing my own one-shot. If you're using a one-shot that someone else wrote, maybe look for some elements where you can adapt it into interests held by those that you're running for. I know my audience are all avid wine drinkers, so I'm going to theme the adventure around a winery. Classic trope. But that's the juice, pun intended. They don't intrinsically know all those classic tropes. I'm the perfect audience for it, because it's basically guaranteed to work. So, as like a bonus tip to this, I plan to go to my liquor store, or package store as we call it here in the Northeast, and buy a few bottles of wine for us to drink while we play, and I plan to use the description on the wine that I buy as a description for the wine that the characters will be drinking in game, so kind of like connected a little bit there. I also plan to make a few references to things that I know they're aware of, like movie quotes and such. I would normally do that with modern things for my players, pop culture references, but is it still a pop culture reference if it's an old thing? Well, anyway, one of the ones I have planned is, it's buried under the big W.
Buried under this big W. You'll see it. You'll see it under this big W. You can't miss it. A big W. And it's been there, and it's been laying there for 15 years.
And if you know that one, bonus points to you, let me know in the comments. Tip number 2, simplify, simplify, simplify. I'm going to use pre-generated characters, and I would suggest you do too. I mean, it's hard enough to find the time to play the session, and hard enough to even explain the game flow to them without having to walk through character creation. I'm basically providing class and ancestry templates. They'll get to fill in the name and physical descriptions that they want, so, they'll have some investment into the character, ideally. But if they don't, then, at least I know they're going to have something that's going to work, stat-wise, and give them a reasonably good experience. And this way, I can also curate the features and things to put on the character sheet and to leave out anything that won't come into play during a one-shot and kind of help control some of the confusion and the overwhelmingness that can come with looking at a character sheet for the first time. Number 3, I'm going to keep the game to a manageable time frame. I mean, I'm thinking I will make the one-shot about a 3-hour thing. Some talkie-talkie, some exploration, a small combat, and likely a final combat. I've written a few one-shots, and they always seem to take longer than I expect, so I'm keeping the number of planned encounters to a minimum and using a few tips to help the action get going. I won't be relinquishing narrative control until it's time to take some kind of action. No meeting at the winery and chatting. This ain't starting a tavern. They will already be at the winery, already in conversation with the proprietor, and I won't be asking that wonderful question of, what would you like to do, until the action is upon them. And as an experienced DM, I can wrangle things back onto the rails of the adventure as needed, and I can do it fairly easily. And I plan to use that power liberally where I feel like it's required to keep things moving. I always want to keep things moving to the next point of action to keep the players engaged and the adventure on pace for a conclusion. So that's the plan. Will the players be able to stop the Fey creature from claiming the souls of the winery proprietor and his family as recompense for the imprisonment of the Fey son to make the vineyards have ideal conditions? Guess we'll find out. Do these tips seem useful? Let me know if you want to hear how this one-shot actually goes in practice. And I'm John. This has been Actually JFDM, and we'll catch you next time.